So let's assume for the moment that the worst comes to pass and Evan Stewart doesn't take the field this year for the Ducks. As I mentioned earlier on the show, the wide receiver room is as well positioned to survive an injury like this as any group on the roster. Now, do I feel awesome, warm and bubbly inside about Evan Stewart not being there? No. Because he was the one proven veteran. Gary Bryant Jr. classifies as a proven veteran, and I don't want to sleep on his potential. A guy who's going into his 6th year of college football, was dinged up last season, borderline 5-star recruit coming out of high school, transferred from USC a couple of years ago. Like, that's now the most veteran guy in the receiver room from a production standpoint. I think he can be poised to see a bigger role without Evan Stewart. I think Justice Lowe, who was the guy that came in and played in the Rose Bowl when Evan Stewart, right before the game was announced that he was out, it was Justice Lowe who went in and played, made a couple of catches, one of them a really good one along the sideline. And, I see the potential. I think Justice Lowe and Evan Stewart, frankly, are the most similar of any two receivers in the room. Like, Justice Lowe is Evan Stewart light. He doesn't have, all the NFL traits necessarily, or the proven production really is what is missing that Evan Stewart has. But Stewart is listed as 6 foot, 175 pounds. Justice Lowe, 6'1", 185. So guys are pretty similar out there. I think Justice Lowe is solid. I haven't seen him take over against a team that's going to go on to win the national championship like Evan Stewart did when he went for 7 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. But does that mean that he can't? Well, he could. He could. It's entirely possible. But the other thought I had, is this about to be big time Dakorien Moore season? When one door closes, another door opens. This situation, if Evan Stewart is actually out for the entire year, stinks for the Oregon offense. They've still got a bunch of weapons, but does this open the door for Oregon to just unleash Dakorien Moore and allow him to have a Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams type season? So I wonder about that because, what I've talked about with regards to Dakorien Moore this offseason is that he is in a perfect situation because I don't think the guys in front of him are so talented that he won't play. I think he has a role one way or the other on the offense. However, he doesn't have to produce. There's no pressure or relying on this guy to be everything that we've hyped him up to be in our heads and on shows like this one. And it's because there are a bunch of veterans in front of him, like Gary Bryant, like Justice Lowe, like Evan Stewart, like Malik Benson. Maybe Jurion Dickey and Kyler Casper see a legitimate role in the offense this year. Like the depth in that receiver room, you got Jeremiah McLaughlin in there. Dylan Gresham was one of the biggest standouts from the spring game, of course. There is still a healthy lineup of talented and, yes, proven receivers, while also providing a little bit of what I talk about with the secondary a lot. There's a high level of talent, not a ton of production, and that makes it mysterious but really interesting. And by the way, on the Dakorien Moore thing, Ryan Williams at Alabama, all the talk, he had the big game against Georgia. He was only 17 years old the entire season. He didn't even hit 1,000 yards in his freshman campaign. Jeremiah Smith did, but that's because he's not of this universe. He's actually an alien that was transported here through a multi-dimensional passway, and he's just here now. He's not going anywhere. But Ryan Williams had 865 yards on 48 catches and 8 touchdowns this past year at Alabama. Also ran for 2 touchdowns on 4 carries for 48 yards. But I think you could certainly, if your takeaway is, well, this is going to open the door for Dakorien Moore to go have the big freshman season that we all want him to have when you bring in the number 1 wide receiver recruit in a high school class, it makes it more likely. If Stewart is not there for the entire season, this certainly makes that far more likely. But I still come back to, it's great that Dakorien Moore is there. This is why I still get comments or notes from people all the time, via Twitter or wherever, like, what do you care about recruiting? What does it matter? They're just going to bring in portal guys, right? Oregon doesn't develop, which is a dumb and stupid narrative, but, it's out there. I come across it. I'm sure many of you do as well. But this is why you go out and get the most competitive depth that you can possibly find. And yeah, you're going to need someone who is not as established of a college football player as Evan Stewart to step up if he ultimately misses the entire season. But do I feel good about what's in that room? I do. I really do. Dorian Dickey looked healthy in the spring game. Remember, that was a 5-star receiver recruit. Oregon's brought in a 5-star receiver in 3 straight cycles now, with Dorian Dickey, Gatlin Bear in 2024, who gets to campus in 2026 after his LDS mission, and Dakorien Moore in 2025. We'll see if that continues in the class of 2026. I think that's asking quite a bit of Ross Douglas, the wide receiver coach, with this being his first year. And when he came over, it wasn't. It was before the cycle heated up in earnest, but he didn't have the ability to establish relationships going back to last summer, which is oftentimes what you need to get highly rated recruits, or any recruit, is you got to have a multi-year relationship with the kid. So I think this receiver room is still deep, talented. A name I will also throw out there, I've mentioned Justice Lowe and Gary Bryant and Dakorien, obviously. Malik Benson flies under the radar. Didn't have a great spring game, but it was just one day. Super talented, super experienced guy. Doesn't have the production, does have the potential, though. We'll call that the 2 P's of skill position players. Production, potential. He's got one of those. The 2 Power 4 schools he's been at, he got buried on the depth chart at Alabama, and he was in a Florida State system last year. He was one of the transfers that had, one of many, of course, that had people picking Florida State to win the ACC last year. And heck, I picked him to win 10 games. Instead, they lost 10 games. College football. It's great. Benson was one of those guys people said, oh, he's going to be a legit go-to weapon on the outside. Well, now he definitely needs to be, because Evan Stewart was a guy last year who can run the whole route tree. We saw that. His touchdown against Maryland was on a short route. He caught all sorts of stuff when Tez Johnson wasn't available against the second half of the Michigan game and the Wisconsin game. But he was a deep threat sort of guy. Benson has that sort of speed, and he also has enough size to be on the outside and take the top off the defense. So that's another guy I think that deserves some recognition for needing potentially to step up in the absence of Evan Stewart, however long that absence is. So curious what you all think. I will certainly be diving into this more next week on the show, because I haven't heard all of your thoughts on this yet. We're going to undergo a weekend. We're going to let everything settle down. We're going to take some breaths, realize Oregon's offense still has a bunch of weapons, and then I didn't even mention Kenyon Sadiq. How about that? Did an entire segment on who could be called upon more. Didn't get to Sadiq yet. Maybe that's for next week on the show. But I want to hear from you guys. Who do you think, if Evan Stewart's out for the whole year, steps up the most this season for the Ducks?